Mother Bear finds a lost toddler in the garbage. What she did put everyone in tears. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The early morning fog hung low over Pine Creek Forest, wrapping the trees in a ghostly embrace. The sun was just beginning to peek through the dense blanket of clouds, casting weak golden rays onto the scattered garbage at the edge of the woods. This makeshift dump site sat just half a mile from Oak Ridge Town, where people regularly discarded their unwanted items despite warnings from local authorities. Among the heaps of trash and forgotten belongings, a small sound emerged, the soft whimper of a child. 2-year-old Lily Morgan sat huddled against a broken refrigerator, her tiny body shivering in the morning chill. Her once white dress was now stained with dirt, her blonde curls tangled with leaves and twigs. Tears streamed down her rosy cheeks as she clutched a tattered teddy bear, her only companion in this frightening place. Lily had been missing since yesterday evening. Her young parents, Jessica Brooks and Logan Carter, had been frantically searching for her all night. The police had organized search parties, but no one thought to check the garbage dump. No one, except for an unexpected visitor making her morning rounds. A large brown bear with a distinctive scar on her right shoulder emerged from the trees with her young cub trailing close behind. The mother bear had been foraging for food in the dump for months now, especially since humans kept pushing further into her territory. The garbage site offered easy meals for her and her growing cub. But this morning was different. As the bear approached her usual hunting grounds, her sensitive nose caught an unfamiliar scent. Something small and human was here, something that didn't belong. The mother bear stopped abruptly, causing her cub to bump into her hind legs. With a gentle grunt, she signaled her cub to stay back while she investigated. Lily's cries grew louder as she spotted the massive animal approaching. She was too young to understand danger, too innocent to feel fear. Instead, her eyes widened with curiosity as the bear came closer, her massive paws making surprisingly little noise among the garbage. The bear circled the child carefully, sniffing the air. Her wild instincts told her to protect her cub and leave this strange human creature alone. But something else pulled at her. Perhaps the memory of her own lost cub from seasons past, or simply the universal understanding of a child in distress. A broken toy made a sudden noise in the garbage pile, startling Lily. Her whimpers turned into loud, desperate wails. Instead of running away from the noise, the mother bear took a step forward, then another, her dark eyes fixed on the tiny human before her, assessing, wondering, deciding. What happened next would shake the beliefs of everyone in Oak Ridge Town, challenging everything they thought they knew about wild animals and the bond between different species. No one could have imagined what would unfold in this garbage dump on this foggy morning, a moment that would forever change the lives of a lost child, a mother bear, and an entire community. The mother bear lowered her massive head toward Lily, her hot breath warming the child's tear-stained face. Lily stopped crying and stared at the bear with wide, innocent eyes. She reached out a tiny hand, her fingers trembling not from fear, but from the cold. The bear sniffed the child's hand carefully, her nostrils flaring with each breath. "Bear," Lily said softly, the simple word hanging in the misty air between them. The mother bear's cub, curious but cautious, peered from behind a pile of discarded furniture. It whimpered quietly, drawing its mother's attention for a brief moment. The sound seemed to awaken something primal in the mother bear, a protective instinct that transcended species. With incredible gentleness, the bear nudged Lily's shoulder with her snout, as if checking to see if she was hurt. Lily giggled, the sound startling in the quiet morning. The bear moved closer, her warm fur brushing against the child's cold skin. Lily didn't hesitate. She wrapped her small arms around the bear's neck, burying her face in the thick fur. What the bear did next defied all natural instincts. She carefully gathered the child closer, using her body to shield Lily from the cold morning air. The cub, sensing no danger, crept closer until it was sitting just inches from the human child. Lily reached out and touched the cub's head, her fingers brushing through its soft fur. "Baby bear," she whispered, smiling through her tears. Meanwhile, in Oak Ridge Town, the search for Lily Morgan had intensified. Jessica Brooks paced the floor of the small police station, her eyes red from crying and lack of sleep. Logan Carter stood by the window, staring blankly at the forest beyond the town limits. "We've searched everywhere," Police Chief Ethan Marshall said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "The woods, the riverbank, every house in town, nothing." "She wouldn't just wander off like that," Jessica insisted, her voice breaking. "She was playing in the yard. I only looked away for a minute to answer the phone." "No one's blaming you, Jess," Logan said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Their relationship had been strained for months. Logan's long hours at the lumber mill left Jessica alone with Lily most days. Arguments had become more frequent, more bitter. Last night's fight had been particularly bad, with Logan storming out and Jessica locking herself in the bathroom to cry. Neither of them had noticed Lily slipping out the back door, following a stray cat into the woods. "I'm sending a team to check the old Morrison property again," Chief Marshall said, trying to offer some hope. "And I've called in rangers from the next county." "What about the dump site?" asked Michael Hayes, a young officer who had just entered the room. "Kids are always drawn to strange places." "That's bear territory," Chief Marshall replied, dismissing the idea. "No way a child her age could make it that far into the woods alone." But Michael wasn't convinced. He'd grown up exploring those woods and knew how easily a curious child could wander far from home. Without saying another word, he grabbed his jacket and headed out. Back at the garbage dump, something extraordinary was happening. The mother bear had carefully moved Lily to a sheltered spot between two large pieces of discarded furniture. Using her massive paws, she'd gathered bits of cloth and paper, creating a makeshift nest for the child. The cub, now fully at ease, played with the tattered teddy bear that Lily had dropped, rolling it between its paws. Lily's eyelids grew heavy as the warmth from the bear's body seeped into her small frame. She yawned, curling her fingers into the bear's fur. "Mama," she murmured, drifting into sleep. The mother bear stayed perfectly still, her body forming a protective barrier between the sleeping child and the outside world. Her ears twitched at every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds, the soft breathing of the human child. What the bear couldn't hear was the approaching footsteps of Michael Hayes, who had decided to check the dump site despite his chief's dismissal. He moved quietly through the forest, years of hunting with his father having taught him how to walk without disturbing a single leaf. As Michael neared the dump, he drew his service weapon, a precaution he'd been trained to take when entering possible bear territory. The morning fog had begun to lift, but visibility was still poor among the trees. He strained his ears, listening for any sound that might guide him. Then he heard it, a soft, rumbling growl. Michael froze, his finger hovering near the trigger of his gun. He peered through the thinning fog and saw a shape that made his blood run cold, a massive brown bear hunched over something small and pale. "Oh, God," he whispered, raising his weapon. In his mind, there was only one possibility. The bear had found Lily first. What Michael couldn't see from his position was that the bear wasn't hunched over Lily in aggression, but in protection. The growl wasn't directed at the child, but at a raccoon that had wandered too close to their shelter. The mother bear sensed danger approaching and positioned herself more firmly between Lily and the unknown threat. Michael took careful aim, his training overriding his fear. One shot. That's all he would need to bring down the bear before it could cause any more harm. His finger tightened on the trigger, but then something unexpected happened. The bear shifted slightly and Michael caught a glimpse of blonde curls and a dirty white dress. Lily was alive, curled up against the bear's side, her small hand resting on the bear's fur. The realization hit Michael like a physical blow. The bear wasn't attacking the child, it was protecting her. He lowered his gun slowly, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Everything he'd been taught about wild animals, about bears in particular, told him this was impossible. Bears were dangerous predators, not protective guardians of lost children. Yet the evidence was right before his eyes. The bear had created a shelter for Lily, had kept her warm through the night. The cub played nearby, uninterested in the human child, except as a curious novelty. Michael took a cautious step forward, and immediately the bear's head snapped up. Their eyes met across the clearing, human and animal, each assessing the other's intentions. The bear's lips pulled back in a warning snarl, revealing yellowed teeth capable of tearing through flesh and bone. The message was clear. Come no closer. It's okay, Michael said softly, holstering his weapon. I'm here to help her. The bear's eyes seemed to narrow, as if considering his words. Michael knew it was ridiculous to think the animal could understand him, but something in its gaze appeared almost human in its intelligence. He reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out his radio. He needed to call this in to get help, but he also knew what would happen if he brought armed officers to this scene. The bear would be shot, regardless of its apparent protection of the child. Michael was faced with an impossible choice: follow protocol and risk the bear's life, or try something completely unorthodox. In that moment, standing in the foggy forest clearing, Officer Michael Hayes made a decision that would change everything. He put the radio back in his pocket. I'm going to help her, he said again, speaking to the bear as if it could understand every word. But I need you to trust me. Slowly, he removed his jacket, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. The bear watched him, muscles tensed and ready to attack if necessary. Michael laid the jacket on the ground and took a step back, then another, creating distance between himself and the garment. It's for the girl, he explained, gesturing to Lily. She's cold. For several minutes, neither moved. The only sounds were the soft breathing of the sleeping child and the occasional rustle as the bear cub played with the teddy bear. Finally, the mother bear nudged Lily gently, waking her. Lily sat up, rubbing her eyes with tiny fists. Bear, she said happily, patting the animal's snout. Then she noticed Michael standing at the edge of the clearing. She stared at him curiously but showed no fear. After spending the night protected by a wild bear, a human in a police uniform hardly seemed threatening. Hello, Lily, Michael called softly. My name is Officer Hayes. Your mommy and daddy are looking for you. Mommy? Lily repeated, fully awake now. She looked around, as if expecting Jessica to appear from behind the garbage piles. Yes, sweetheart, she's worried about you. Michael pointed to his jacket. I brought you something warm to wear. Lily looked at the jacket, then at the bear, then back at Michael. She seemed to understand what was being asked of her. With a child's simple acceptance of the extraordinary, she patted the bear's neck and stood up on wobbly legs. Thank you, Bear, she said solemnly, as if saying goodbye to a beloved babysitter. The mother bear remained perfectly still as Lily took a few unsteady steps away from the safety of their shelter. The cub whimpered, dropping the teddy bear and moving closer to its mother. The bear's eyes never left Michael, watching for any sign of threat. Lily reached the jacket and picked it up, struggling with its weight. Michael fought the urge to rush forward and help her, knowing that any sudden movement might provoke the bear. Instead, he knelt down, making himself appear smaller and less threatening. "Can you come to me, Lily?" he asked gently. Lily looked back at the bear one more time, then nodded. She wrapped the oversized jacket around her shoulders and walked toward Michael with the determined waddle of a toddler. Each step took her farther from the bear and closer to the human world she belonged to. When she finally reached him, Michael resisted the urge to grab her and run. Instead, he carefully lifted her into his arms, keeping his movements slow and his body partially turned away from the bear, non-confrontational. "You're safe now," he whispered, holding her close. "You're going home." Lily rested her head on his shoulder but kept her eyes on the bear. "Bear nice," she said simply. "Yes," Michael agreed, surprising himself. The bear was very nice. As he began to back away from the clearing, the mother bear rose to her full height, towering over the garbage piles. The cub scampered to her side, seeking security. For one heart-stopping moment, Michael thought the bear would charge, that the maternal instinct that had protected Lily through the night would now view him as a threat, stealing away what the bear had guarded. But the bear merely watched, her dark eyes following their retreat. Michael continued backward, step by careful step, until the trees began to thicken between them and the clearing was no longer visible. Only then did he turn and begin to walk normally, holding Lily securely against his chest. Only then did he pull out his radio and press the call button. "This is Officer Hayes," he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "I've found her. Lily Morgan is alive." The radio crackled with multiple voices responding at once, a chorus of relief and disbelief. Chief Marshall's voice broke through the others. "Where? How is she? Do you need medical assistance?" Michael adjusted Lily in his arms. She was already falling asleep again, the ordeal of the night and morning catching up with her small body. "She's okay," he reported. "A little cold and dirty, but no visible injuries. I found her at the dump site just like I thought." He hesitated, unsure how to explain what he had witnessed. How could he make them understand that a wild bear, the same species they routinely warned people about, the same animals they sometimes hunted, had protected a human child through the night? "Michael? You still there?" Chief Marshall's voice held a note of concern. "Yeah, I'm here. I'm bringing her in now. Tell her parents she's safe." "Already on it. They're waiting at the station." Michael clicked off the radio and looked down at Lily's peaceful face. "You had quite an adventure, didn't you?" he whispered. She didn't respond, having drifted into exhausted sleep. As he carried her through the forest, Michael's mind raced. He needed to decide what to tell everyone. The truth seemed impossible. Who would believe that a bear had created a nest for a human child, had protected her through the night? They would think he was crazy, or worse, that he was making up stories to cover some kind of negligence on his part. But lying felt wrong too. The bear had saved Lily's life. Without its protection, the child would have died from exposure during the cold night. The animal deserved recognition, not fear, and certainly not hunters tracking it down out of misplaced concern. By the time Michael reached the edge of the forest, he had made his decision. He would tell a modified version of the truth, at least for now. A police cruiser was waiting at the trailhead, its lights flashing silently. Officer Connor Adams jumped out as soon as he spotted Michael emerging from the trees with Lily in his arms. "Is she okay?" Connor asked, rushing forward. "She's fine," Michael assured him, "just sleeping." "Thank God," Connor said, opening the back door of the cruiser. "The whole town's been going crazy. Her parents are falling apart at the station." Michael carefully placed Lily on the back seat, buckling the belt around her small frame. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. "How did you find her?" Connor asked as they got into the front seats. "Chief said you went to check the dump site, but that's miles from her house. How'd she get all the way out there?" Michael took a deep breath. "She must have followed the old logging road. It's not that far if you go that way instead of through the dense forest. Still, for a 2-year-old, that's crazy." "Kids can surprise you," Michael said, looking back at Lily. "She's tougher than she looks." "But how did she survive the night? It got down to 40 degrees, a kid that small, with no jacket." This was the moment of truth. Michael looked straight ahead, watching the trees give way to the first buildings of Oak Ridge town. "She found shelter," he said finally. "Some old furniture at the dump created a kind of cubbyhole, and she had this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the tattered teddy bear, which he had grabbed just before leaving the clearing. The bear cub had abandoned it when it retreated to its mother's side. Connor nodded, accepting the explanation without question. It was plausible enough. A child finding a sheltered spot, curling up with her stuffed animal. People had survived worse. As they pulled up to the small police station, Michael could see a crowd had gathered. Word had spread quickly through Oak Ridge town that Lily Morgan had been found alive. In a community of barely 5,000 people, a missing child was everyone's concern. The cruiser door had barely opened when Jessica Brooks burst through the station doors, her face streaked with tears. Logan Carter was right behind her, his normally stoic expression cracking with emotion. "Lily!" Jessica cried, rushing to the car. Michael carefully lifted the sleeping child from the back seat. Her eyes fluttered open at the sound of her mother's voice. "Mommy," she said sleepily, reaching out her arms. Jessica took her daughter, clutching her so tightly that Lily squirmed in protest. Logan wrapped his arms around both of them, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "You found her," he said to Michael over Jessica's shoulder. "How can we ever thank you?" Michael shifted uncomfortably under the weight of their gratitude. "Just doing my job," he said. "She's a brave little girl." Chief Marshal pushed through the crowd, his weathered face showing relief. "Let's get her inside," he said, placing a hand on Jessica's shoulder. The doctors waiting to check her over. As they moved toward the station entrance, the crowd parted respectfully. Many had participated in the search, combing the woods until the early hours of the morning. Their exhaustion was forgotten in the joy of this moment. Inside the station, the town doctor, Savannah Reed, was waiting with a medical bag. She was a young woman who had returned to her hometown after medical school, dedicated to serving the community that had raised her. "Let's have a look at our little adventurer," she said gently, guiding Jessica to place Lily on a desk that had been cleared for this purpose. Lily blinked up at all the faces surrounding her, seeming overwhelmed by the attention. Then her gaze fixed on Michael, who stood slightly apart from the group. "Bear," she said clearly, pointing at him. The room fell silent. Jessica looked at her daughter in confusion. "What, sweetie?" "Nice bear," Lily insisted, still pointing at Michael. "Big bear," Logan laughed nervously. "She's confused, probably talking about her teddy." Michael stepped forward, holding out the tattered toy. "Here you go, Lily." "Is this what you mean?" Lily took the teddy bear but shook her head stubbornly. Number Big Bear. In garbage. Big Bear help Lily. The adults exchanged concerned glances. Dr. Reed placed a gentle hand on Lily's forehead. She doesn't have a fever, but she might be experiencing some confusion from exposure and dehydration. Bear make bed, Lily continued, warming to her story now that she had an audience. Baby bear play. Chief Marshal turned to Michael, his expression serious. Did you see any signs of bears at the dump site? This was it. The moment Michael had been dreading. He could feel everyone's eyes on him, waiting for his answer. The truth hovered on his lips, begging to be spoken. But he looked at Lily, at her parents who had just experienced the worst night of their lives, at the townsfolk who feared the bears that lived in their forest. This wasn't the time for a story that would only cause more fear and confusion. No signs of bears, he said firmly. Just garbage and some old furniture where she took shelter. The cold and stress probably gave her bad dreams. Chief Marshal nodded, satisfied with this explanation. We'll send a team out to secure that dump site better. Should have done it years ago. No, Michael said, more forcefully than he intended. Everyone looked at him in surprise. I mean, there's no need to go there right away. It's secure enough. We should focus on Lily now. The chief gave him a curious look, but didn't push the issue. All right, we'll deal with it later. Dr. Reed had been examining Lily while they talked, checking her for injuries or signs of hypothermia. She's remarkably fine, she announced. A little dehydrated, some minor scrapes and bruises, but nothing serious. It's quite amazing, actually. It's a miracle, Jessica said, stroking her daughter's hair. Our little miracle. Michael slipped away while everyone was focused on Lily, needing a moment alone to process what he had witnessed. He stepped outside the station and leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths of the cool morning air. Quite a morning, huh? Michael turned to see Jacob Bennett, the local wildlife officer, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Michael, who accepted it gratefully. You could say that, Michael agreed, taking a sip of the hot liquid. Jacob leaned against the wall beside him. Found her at the dump site, I hear. News travels fast. Small town, Jacob shrugged. So, a 2-year-old wandered miles from home, survived a cold night with minimal shelter, and came out basically unharmed. That sound about right. There was something in Jacob's tone that made Michael look at him sharply. What are you getting at? Jacob took a slow sip of his coffee. Nothing. Just seems unusual. Kids are resilient. They are, Jacob agreed, and bears are protective of their young. Michael nearly choked on his coffee. What? Jacob's eyes met his, knowing and calm. I've spent 20 years studying the wildlife in these forests, Michael. I know every bear within 50 miles of here, including a female with a distinctive scar on her right shoulder who lost a cub to poachers last year. I don't know what you're talking about, Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. Sure you do. Jacob's voice dropped lower. That bear has been hanging around the dump for months. She's never been aggressive, even when people get too close. There's something different about her, something almost human in how she watches people. Michael stared at his coffee, unwilling to confirm or deny anything. Look, Jacob continued, I'm not saying I know what happened out there. But if, hypothetically, a bear did something unusual, something that challenged everything we think we know about wild animals, I'd want to protect that bear. Wouldn't you? Their eyes met again, and Michael saw understanding in Jacob's gaze. Hypothetically, Michael said carefully, I would. Jacob nodded, pushing away from the wall. The dump's bear territory, always has been. Be a shame if a bunch of scared people went out there hunting because of some misunderstanding. It would, Michael agreed. I think I'll suggest to the chief that we give the bears some space for a while. No reason to disturb them when they haven't bothered anyone. That sounds like a good idea. Jacob clapped him on the shoulder. Get some rest, hero. You've earned it. As Jacob walked away, Michael felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He wasn't alone in his desire to protect the bear that had saved Lily's life. There were others who might understand if they knew the truth. Inside the station, the celebration continued. Lily had perked up after drinking some juice and was now sitting on her father's lap, surrounded by admiring townsfolk. Michael watched through the window as she gestured animatedly, clearly telling some version of her adventure. Most of the adults were smiling indulgently, assuming she was making up stories as children often do. But Michael noticed that Jessica was watching her daughter with a more thoughtful expression, her head tilted slightly as if trying to understand something just beyond her grasp. When Lily pointed toward the forest and said, "Bear," again, Jessica's eyes lifted and met Michael's through the window. There was a question in her gaze, a hint of understanding that her daughter's stories might not be entirely imagination. Michael held her gaze for a long moment, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Jessica's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't look shocked or frightened. Instead, a slow wonder spread across her face, and she pulled her daughter closer, whispering something in her ear that made Lily smile. Some truths were too extraordinary for everyone to understand, but for those who were ready to hear them, they could change everything. 3 days later, Michael found himself drawn back to the dump site. He told himself it was to check that no one had disturbed the area, that the bears were safe, but deep down he knew he was hoping for another glimpse of the mother bear, who had defied all natural instincts to protect a human child. The dump was quiet in the late afternoon sun. The garbage piles seemed less ominous now, transformed in his mind from a place of squalor to the site of something miraculous. He moved carefully through the clearing, alert for any sign of the bears. He had almost given up when he spotted it, a flash of brown fur behind a broken washing machine. The mother bear emerged slowly, cautiously, her dark eyes fixed on him with unmistakable recognition. The cub bounded behind her, more playful and less wary. Michael stood perfectly still, making no threatening moves. "Hello again," he said softly, feeling only slightly foolish for talking to a wild animal. The bear watched him, her head tilted slightly as if assessing his intentions. Then, to Michael's amazement, she lowered herself to the ground in a posture that was almost relaxed. Taking a risk that went against all his training, Michael slowly sat down as well, creating a strange kind of symmetry between them. Human and bear, separated by species and instinct, but connected by a shared experience neither could fully explain. The cub, emboldened by its mother's calm, ventured closer, sniffing curiously. Michael remained still, hardly daring to breathe. This close, he could see the intelligence in the bear's eyes, the awareness that seemed beyond animal instinct. "She's safe," he said, not knowing if the bear could understand his words but feeling compelled to speak anyway. "The little girl is home with her family, thanks to you." The bear made a soft huffing sound, her eyes never leaving his face. For a wild, impossible moment, Michael felt that she understood, that there was communication happening between them that transcended language. Then, with deliberate movements, the bear rose and turned away, calling her cub with a low growl. The cub gave Michael one last curious look before scampering after its mother, both disappearing into the thick forest beyond the dump. Michael remained sitting for a long time, processing what had just happened. He had been taught all his life that wild animals were driven by instinct alone, that the divide between human and animal consciousness was vast and unbridgeable, but now he wasn't so sure. Perhaps there were connections possible that science couldn't explain. Perhaps motherhood, the fierce, protective love of a parent for a child, was a language that crossed species boundaries, a universal understanding that could triumph over even the most basic instincts of predator and prey. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the garbage dump, Michael finally stood and began the walk back to town. He knew he would never tell most people what he had seen here. The mother bear who had saved a human child. The moment of silent communication between man and bear. Some stories were too extraordinary for most people to believe. But he would remember, and he would make sure that this part of the forest remained a safe haven for the bears that lived here, especially for a mother bear with a distinctive scar and eyes that seemed to hold wisdom beyond her wild nature. In Oak Ridge Town, life had begun to return to normal. The excitement over Lily's rescue had faded into routine, though she was still something of a local celebrity. Children begged her to tell her bear story at daycare, and adults smiled indulgently when she insisted that a big nice bear had taken care of her in the forest. Only a few people suspected there might be truth to her childish tales. Jacob Bennett, who had quietly redirected all hunting parties away from the dump site. Dr. Savannah Reed, who couldn't quite explain the lingering scent of wild animal on Lily's clothes and hair when she had examined her. And Jessica Brooks, who had found strands of coarse brown fur clutched in her daughter's small fist after they brought her home. Jessica hadn't told anyone about the fur, not even Logan. Their relationship was still fragile, though Lily's safe return had bridged some of the distance between them. They were trying harder now, both shaken by how close they had come to losing the most important thing in their lives. One evening, as Jessica tucked the Lily into bed, the child asked a question that had clearly been on her mind. "Mommy, can we visit Bear?" Jessica smoothed her daughter's hair, buying time to think. "The bear lives in the forest, sweetie. Wild animals need to stay in their homes, and we need to stay in ours." Lily considered this, her small brow furrowed. But Bear helped Lily, Bear's friend. Jessica sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes magical things happen that we can't explain. The bear helped you because you needed help, and that was very special. But the bear needs to stay wild and free in the forest." "Bear has baby," Lily said sleepily, clutching her repaired teddy bear. Jessica had carefully stitched it back together, recognizing its importance to her daughter. Baby Bear played with Teddy. "I'm sure Baby Bear misses playing with you," Jessica said gently. "But you know what? You can remember the bear every time you hug your teddy." Lily smiled at this idea, her eyes drifting closed. "Tell Bear thank you," she murmured as sleep overtook her. "I will, sweetie," Jessica promised, though she had no intention of venturing into the forest to find a wild bear. But later that night, after Logan had fallen asleep, Jessica found herself standing by the window, looking out at the dark forest beyond the town limits. She opened the window slightly, letting in the cool night air. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness, feeling slightly foolish but compelled to keep her promise to her daughter. "Thank you for protecting her when we couldn't." The night offered no response except the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. But somewhere in the forest, a mother bear raised her head, as if listening to a distant call that only she could hear. She nudged her sleeping cub gently, then settled back down, her dark eyes reflecting the distant stars. Two mothers, separated by species and circumstance, connected by the universal thread of love and protection. one in a cozy house at the edge of town, one in a den deep within the forest, each fiercely devoted to their child, each capable of understanding and compassion beyond the boundaries of their separate worlds. And between them, a story that would live on in whispered bedtime tales and forest legends, the miracle of the mother bear and the lost child, a testament to the extraordinary connections possible in a world still full of wonders waiting to be discovered. Spring turned to summer in Oak Ridge Town. The forest bloomed with new life, painting the landscape in vibrant greens and colorful wildflowers. The town settled back into its routine, though the story of Lily and the bear continued to be told, evolving with each retelling until many dismissed it as just another local legend. But for those who knew the truth, life had been forever changed. Michael Hayes found himself spending more time in the forest, often bringing Jacob Bennett along on what they called wildlife surveys, but were really quiet pilgrimages to check on the mother bear and her growing cub. They never approached too closely, respecting the wild nature of the animals, but they made sure no hunters ventured into that part of the forest. As for Lily, she continued to speak of her bear with the absolute conviction that only a child can possess. Her parents had stopped trying to convince her it was just a dream or her imagination. Instead, they listened to her stories, amazed at the details she recalled. Details that seemed too specific for a child to invent. "Bear has a mark," she would say, pointing to her own right shoulder. "Right here, and baby bear has white paws." These were facts that Michael had confirmed during his quiet observations. The mother bear did indeed have a distinctive scar on her right shoulder, and her cub had unusual white fur on its front paws. Details that Lily couldn't have known unless she had truly spent time with these specific bears. Logan Carter had initially been skeptical of his daughter's tales, attributing them to an overactive imagination. But as the summer progressed, he found himself looking at the forest differently. The bears he had once viewed as dangerous predators now seemed more complex, more aware. He stopped participating in the town's occasional hunting parties, much to the surprise of his friends. One evening in late July, Logan was working late at the lumber mill when he heard an unusual sound coming from the storage yard. It was after hours, and he was alone, finishing some paperwork before heading home. The sound came again, a soft, shuffling noise, followed by what almost sounded like a child's whimper. Logan grabbed a flashlight and ventured out into the yard. Stacks of freshly cut timber rose on either side, creating a maze of wooden corridors. The sun had set, leaving the yard in deep shadow broken only by a few security lights. "Hello?" he called, feeling foolish. "Is someone there?" The sound came again. More clearly this time, definitely a whimper but not human. Logan followed the noise, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. As he rounded a corner formed by two large timber stacks, the light fell on a small, furry form huddled against the wood. It was a bear cub, trembling with fear or cold or both. Its distinctive white front paws were instantly recognizable from Lily's descriptions. The cub looked up at Logan, its dark eyes reflecting the flashlight beam. Logan froze, his heart pounding. Where there was a cub, a mother bear was never far away. He quickly scanned the surrounding area, expecting to see the massive form of an angry mother bear charging to protect her young. But the yard remained quiet except for the soft whimpering of the cub. Something was wrong. The mother wouldn't have left her cub alone, especially not in a human place like the lumber yard. Logan took a cautious step closer, and the cub pressed itself harder against the timber, clearly terrified. "It's okay," Logan said softly, using the same gentle tone he used when Lily had nightmares. "I won't hurt you." He crouched down, making himself smaller, less threatening. The cub watched him with wary eyes but stopped trembling quite so violently. "Where's your mama?" Logan asked, still scanning the yard for signs of the mother bear. As if in answer to his question, a faint roar echoed from the forest beyond the lumber yard. The cub's head jerked up, its ears perked toward the sound. Another roar followed, this one sounding pained or distressed. Logan stood up straight, his mind racing. The mother bear was in trouble, and somehow the cub had gotten separated from her, wandering into the lumber yard in confusion. He had to make a decision, one that went against everything he'd been taught about wild animals. The memory of his daughter's words echoed in his mind. Bear nice. Bear helped Lily. If there was any truth to those stories, if this was indeed the same bear that had protected his child during her night in the forest, then he owed this animal a debt that could never truly be repaid. "All right," he said aloud, more to steady himself than to communicate with the cub. "Let's find your mama." Keeping a safe distance, Logan began moving toward the edge of the yard, gesturing for the cub to follow. To his surprise, the animal seemed to understand, cautiously trailing behind him as he led the way toward the forest. At the edge of the lumber yard, Logan hesitated. The forest stretched dark and forbidding before him, nothing like the friendly woods he had known all his life. Entering at night, alone, with a bear cub in tow, was either the bravest or the stupidest thing he had ever done. Another roar, weaker this time, made the decision for him. Logan took a deep breath and stepped into the forest, the cub following close behind. The darkness under the trees was almost complete. Logan's flashlight created a small circle of visibility, beyond which shadows moved and shifted with each breath of wind. He strained his ears, trying to pinpoint the direction of the roars. "Where is she?" he whispered to the cub, feeling slightly ridiculous for expecting an answer. But to his amazement, the cub moved ahead of him, glancing back as if to make sure he was following. Logan fell into step behind the small animal, trusting it to lead him to its mother. They walked for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, moving deeper into the forest. The cub seemed to know exactly where it was going, navigating the darkness with much more confidence than Logan could muster. Finally, they reached a small clearing. Logan's flashlight beam swept across the open space until it landed on a dark form lying on the ground. The mother bear was sprawled on her side, her breathing labored. As the light hit her, she raised her head weakly, her eyes reflecting the beam. The cub rushed forward, nuzzling against its mother with soft, distressed sounds. The mother bear responded with a gentle huff, but couldn't seem to rise. Logan approached cautiously, keeping the flashlight beam slightly averted to avoid blinding the animals. As he got closer, he saw the problem. The bear's hind leg was caught in a cruel metal trap, the kind that had been outlawed in the state years ago, but that some poachers still used. The trap's teeth had sunk deep into the bear's flesh, and blood darkened the fur around the wound. "Who would do this?" Logan muttered, anger rising in his chest. He had never liked the idea of traps, even when hunting was necessary for food. This kind of trap was designed only for cruelty, not clean hunting. The mother bear watched him approach, her dark eyes wary but not aggressive. She seemed to understand that her cub had brought this human to help, not harm. Or perhaps she was simply too weak from blood loss to defend herself. Logan knelt beside her, keeping a respectful distance from her head and powerful front paws. The trap was anchored to the ground by a heavy chain, preventing the bear from dragging herself away. She had clearly been struggling for hours, her strength slowly ebbing. "I'm going to help you," Logan said, trying to sound confident despite his racing heart. But you need to stay calm, okay? He reached slowly toward the trap, watching the bear's reaction. She made no move to attack, her gaze fixed on his face with an intelligence that sent a shiver down his spine. This was no ordinary wild animal. There was awareness in those eyes, an understanding that seemed impossible and yet undeniable. The trap was a standard design, one that Logan had seen before. It had a release mechanism that required significant strength to operate, strength designed to be beyond what the trapped animal could manage. But a human could trigger it if they knew how. Logan positioned his hands on either side of the trap's jaws, preparing to exert the pressure needed to release the spring. "This might hurt," he warned, not knowing if the bear could understand his words but feeling compelled to speak anyway. Just a little more pain than freedom. He pressed down hard, using all his strength. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a metallic snap, the trap's jaws released. The bear let out a rumbling growl that was half pain, half relief. Logan quickly moved back, giving the injured animal space. The wound was deep and would need time to heal, but at least now the bear had a chance. The cub pressed against its mother, making soft sounds that seemed like encouragement. "Can you stand?" Logan asked, watching as the mother bear struggled to rise. She managed to get to her 3 good legs, but kept the injured one raised, unwilling to put weight on it. She took a tentative step, then another, clearly in pain but determined. The bear turned to look at Logan, their eyes meeting in the dim light of the flashlight. There was something in that gaze. Gratitude, recognition, connection, that transcended the barriers between their species. For a moment, they were not human and bear, but simply 2 beings who had helped each other's families when it mattered most. Then the mother bear huffed softly, nudging her cub toward the trees. The cub hesitated, looking back at Logan as if reluctant to leave. The mother made a more insistent sound, and finally the cub obeyed, following its mother as she limped slowly into the darkness of the forest. Logan stood watching until their shapes disappeared among the trees. Only then did he release the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He had just freed a wild bear from a trap, had been close enough to touch one of the forest's most dangerous predators, and had walked away unharmed. It didn't make logical sense. Bears were wild animals, driven by instinct to protect themselves and their young, often aggressively. Yet this bear had allowed him to approach, to free her from the trap, had even seemed to understand that he was trying to help. Could Lily have been right all along? Had a bear really protected his daughter that night in the forest? The evidence was becoming harder to dismiss as coincidence or childish imagination. Logan turned and began the long walk back to the lumber yard, his flashlight beam swinging through the darkness. He had a story to tell when he got home. A story that would change everything. When Logan arrived home that night, much later than expected, he found Jessica waiting up for him, worry etched on her face. "Where have you been?" she demanded as he walked through the door. "I called the mill an hour ago, and no one answered." Logan set down his flashlight and ran a hand through his hair, which was damp with sweat despite the cool night air. "You're not going to believe what happened," he said. He told her everything, finding the cub in the lumber yard, following it into the forest, freeing the mother bear from the trap. As he spoke, Jessica's expression changed from concern to disbelief to wonder. "The same bear?" she whispered when he had finished. "The one with the scar on her shoulder. You're sure?" Logan nodded. It had to be. The cub had white front paws, just like Lily described. And the mother, Jess, she looked at me like she knew me, like she understood what I was doing and why. Jessica sank onto the couch, trying to process this new information. So, Lily was telling the truth. A bear really did protect her that night. I think so, Logan admitted. I can't explain it any other way. No wild bear would have let me get that close unless there was some kind of understanding between us. They sat in silence for a moment, both contemplating the implications of what had happened. We need to tell Michael, Jessica said finally, and Jacob Bennett. They've been protecting those bears all along, I think. They should know about the trap. Logan agreed, his face darkening. Whoever set that trap needs to be found. It's illegal, and it's cruel. If there's one, there might be others. The next morning, they called both men to their house. Lily was playing in her room when Michael and Jacob arrived, giving the adults privacy to talk. Logan recounted his experience again, watching as Michael and Jacob exchanged knowing glances. When he finished, Michael let out a long breath. "I knew it," he said. "I knew there was something special about that bear." Jacob nodded, his weathered face serious. "I've been monitoring poaching activity in the area for months now. There have been reports of illegal traps, but we haven't been able to catch anyone in the act. Most likely it's outsiders coming in for the pelts and gallbladders. There's still a black market for bear parts." "What can we do?" Jessica asked. "If these are the same bears that saved Lily—" "We need to find all the traps," Jacob said decisively. "And then we need to set up surveillance to catch whoever is setting them." "I want to help," Logan said. "I owe that bear my daughter's life." Michael looked thoughtful. "There's something else. I've been observing the mother bear for months now. She's not like other bears I've encountered. The way she watches, the way she seems to understand. I've been wondering if there's something we're missing about animal intelligence, especially in bears." "What do you mean?" Jessica asked. "I've been reading research about animal cognition," Michael explained. "There are scientists studying the emotional intelligence of various species, elephants, dolphins, primates. But bears aren't usually included in those studies because they're so dangerous and solitary. What if we're underestimating them?" Jacob considered this. "It would explain some things I've observed over the years. Bears learning complex behaviors to access food, recognizing individual humans from a distance, returning to help sites year after year." "Do you think we could get researchers interested?" Logan asked. "If we could prove that bears are more aware than we thought." "It might change how people see them," Jessica finished, "how they treat them." "It's worth considering," Jacob said. "But first, we need to deal with these traps and the poachers setting them. We can't let them hurt any more bears." As the adults discussed plans to search for traps and set up trail cameras to catch the poachers, none of them noticed the small figure standing in the hallway, listening to every word. Lily had slipped out of her room, curious about the visitors, and had heard enough to understand that her bear, her protector and friend, was in danger. In her 2-year-old mind, the connection was simple. Her bear had helped her, and now her bear needed help, and somehow, in the way that children often do, she understood that she had a role to play in saving the animals that had saved her. The adults were so engrossed in their planning that they didn't notice when Lily slipped back to her room, her small face set with determination. She didn't have the words to explain what she was feeling, but she knew with absolute certainty that she and the bear were connected in a way that was important and special. That night, after her parents had put her to bed, Lily lay awake, looking out her window at the dark forest beyond the yard. Somewhere out there, the mother bear was nursing her injured leg, protecting her cub, surviving. "Bear," Lily whispered into the darkness. "Lily, help you." She didn't know how yet, but she was certain that she would find a way. The bond between them, between child and bear, between two mothers, between humans and wild creatures, was stronger than anyone could imagine. And it was about to be tested in ways that would astonish them all. As summer progressed, the small group dedicated to protecting the bears grew more organized. Jacob Bennett led expeditions into the forest to locate and disarm traps, while Michael set up trail cameras in strategic locations to catch the poachers in action. Logan and Jessica contributed time and resources, determined to repay the debt they felt they owed to the mother bear. Lily watched all this activity with keen interest, absorbing far more than the adults realized. Her vocabulary was expanding rapidly, and with it, her ability to express the complex connection she felt with the bears. "Bear dreams," she told her mother one morning over breakfast. "Lily sees bear in dreams." Jessica paused in buttering a piece of toast. "You dream about the bear, sweetie." Lily nodded seriously. "Bear talks to Lily, says forest danger." Jessica felt a chill run down her spine despite the warm summer morning. "What kind of danger?" "Bad men," Lily said, her small face solemn. "Hurt trees, hurt bears." Jessica might have dismissed this as childish imagination a few months ago, but after everything that had happened, she found herself taking her daughter's words seriously. "Did the bear tell you where in the forest the bad men are?" she asked, keeping her voice casual despite her racing heart. Lily considered this, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Big water," she said finally. "Where big water jumps down." "The waterfall." Jessica felt her breath catch. There was a large waterfall deep in the forest, part of the river that ran through Pine Creek Valley. It was remote, difficult to access, and not part of the regular patrol routes that Jacob followed. As soon as Logan returned from the morning shift at the mill, Jessica told him about Lily's dream. To her relief, he didn't dismiss it. "The waterfall would be a good place for poachers to set up camp," he said thoughtfully. "It's isolated, has fresh water, and game trails pass nearby." "You don't think it's just a coincidence? A child's dream?" Logan looked at his daughter, who was playing contentedly with her toys on the living room floor. "After everything that's happened, I'm not sure what to believe anymore. But I know one thing. I trust Lily's connection with that bear. If she says there's danger near the waterfall, I think we should check it out." They called Jacob that afternoon, and he agreed to organize an expedition to the waterfall the next day. Logan would join him, along with Michael and two other trusted residents of Oak Ridge Town who had become part of their informal bear protection group. Jessica would stay home with Lily, though she insisted on being kept informed via radio. The waterfall was a 4-hour hike from the nearest access road, meaning the group would need to camp overnight to properly investigate the area. Early the next morning, as Logan prepared to leave, Lily came to him with her tattered teddy bear in her arms. "Bear, go with Daddy," she said, holding out the stuffed animal. "Bear, help find." Logan knelt to accept the precious gift, touched by his daughter's gesture. "I'll take good care of him," he promised, "and he'll help me find the bad men." Lily nodded, completely serious. Bear knows. Bear helps. Logan tucked the teddy bear into his backpack, zipping it carefully so only the head peeked out. He kissed Lily goodbye, hugged Jessica, and joined the others waiting in Jacob's truck. The expedition to the waterfall was grueling. The summer heat made the hike challenging, and the terrain grew steeper and more difficult as they approached the remote waterfall. But by late afternoon, they had set up camp about half a mile downstream, where the rushing water provided both background noise and a natural mask for their own sounds. Jacob split the group into pairs to scout the area. He and Logan would check upstream of the waterfall, while Michael and another volunteer would investigate downstream. The fifth member would guard their camp and equipment. As Jacob and Logan made their way along the riverbank, moving quietly and staying alert for any signs of human activity, Logan found himself continually checking on the teddy bear peeking out from his backpack. It seemed silly, this childish talisman, and yet he felt strangely comforted by its presence. They had been hiking for about 20 minutes when Jacob suddenly raised his hand, signaling for Logan to stop. Jacob pointed silently toward a fallen tree that bridged part of the river. There, caught on a broken branch, was a scrap of orange fabric. Jacob moved closer, carefully retrieving the fabric without disturbing anything around it. "Hunting vest," he whispered. "Recent, too. The color hasn't faded much." They continued more cautiously now, aware that they might be close to the poachers' camp. The roar of the waterfall grew louder as they approached, making it harder to hear any human sounds that might warn of danger. It was Logan who spotted the cabin first. A crude structure built into the hillside about 50 yards from the top of the waterfall, partially concealed by the natural rock formation and surrounding trees. From most angles, it would be completely invisible, but their path along the river had brought them to one of the few vantage points from which it could be seen. Jacob studied it through binoculars. No smoke from the chimney, he noted. No movement. They might be out setting traps. Or they're inside, waiting out the heat of the day, Logan suggested. Jacob nodded. "We need to get closer. See if we can confirm this is our poachers and not just some hermit's legal residence." They circled wide, approaching the cabin from above to minimize the chance of being spotted. As they drew nearer, other signs became visible. A skinning rack partially concealed behind the cabin, piles of metal that could be trap components, a small shed that might contain illegal wildlife parts prepared for transport. "This is it," Jacob whispered. "This is what we've been looking for." He took out a small camera and began documenting everything they could see from their hidden vantage point. The evidence would be crucial for obtaining a warrant if they needed to involve state authorities. As Jacob photographed the cabin and surrounding area, Logan felt a strange sensation, as if they were being watched. He scanned the forest around them but saw nothing unusual. Still, the feeling persisted, raising the hair on the back of his neck. "Jacob," he whispered, "I think—" The crack of a rifle interrupted him, the bullet splintering the tree trunk inches from Jacob's head. Both men dove for cover as a second shot rang out. "Move!" Jacob hissed, crawling rapidly away from their exposed position. Logan followed, heart pounding, as more shots echoed through the forest. They had seriously underestimated the poachers. These weren't casual hunters, but organized criminals with lookouts and weapons. As Logan and Jacob scrambled through the underbrush, trying to put distance between themselves and the shooters, Logan found himself wondering if they would make it out alive. "We need to get back to the others," Jacob panted as they paused behind a large boulder. "Warn them and call for backup." Logan nodded, trying to catch his breath. The radio was with their companion at the base camp, too far away to reach quickly. Another shot rang out, closer this time. The poachers were tracking them, using their superior knowledge of the terrain to close in. Logan and Jacob exchanged grim looks, both understanding the gravity of their situation. "Split up," Jacob decided. "Better chance one of us makes it back. You head straight downriver. I'll lead them east, then circle back." Before Logan could protest, Jacob was moving, deliberately making more noise than necessary to draw attention away from Logan's escape route. It was a selfless act from a man dedicated to protecting wildlife, and now protecting his friend as well. Logan hesitated only a moment before following the plan, moving as quietly as possible toward the river. He had gone perhaps 50 yards when he heard a sound that made his blood run cold, a cry of pain, unmistakably human, followed by triumphant shouts. They had Jacob. Logan froze, torn between the desperate need to help his friend and the knowledge that rushing back would only result in his own capture. He could hear men's voices now, rough and angry, demanding to know if Jacob was alone. The decision was made for him when he heard Jacob's response, clear despite the distance. "I'm alone. Wildlife survey, nothing more." Jacob was giving him a chance to escape, to bring help. Logan swallowed hard and continued toward the river, each step feeling like a betrayal, yet knowing it was the only way to ultimately help his friend. As he approached the riverbank, Logan became aware that the strange feeling of being watched had returned. He glanced around warily, knowing the poachers could have split up to search for other intruders. What he saw instead stopped him in his tracks. Standing at the edge of the trees, perfectly still, and watching him with intelligent eyes was the mother bear. Her injured leg had healed enough for her to walk, though she still favored it slightly. Beside her, the cub with white paws peered curiously at Logan. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. Logan stared at the bears, and they stared back, a silent communication passing between them. Then, with deliberate movements, the mother bear turned and began walking parallel to the river, occasionally looking back as if to ensure Logan was following. Logan hesitated only briefly before falling into step behind the animals, keeping a respectful distance. The bear seemed to be leading him downstream, but not along the obvious path. Instead, she chose routes that offered cover, that kept them concealed from anyone who might be watching from above. "You're helping me," Logan whispered in amazement. "You're actually helping me escape." The bear gave no sign of understanding his words, but her actions spoke volumes. She was guiding him away from danger, using her knowledge of the forest to find the safest path. They had traveled perhaps half a mile when the bears suddenly stopped. The mother bear turned to look at Logan, then deliberately walked to a dense thicket and pushed her way inside. Curious, Logan followed, ducking under branches to enter what turned out to be a small, natural enclosure formed by fallen trees and thick underbrush. Inside, to his astonishment, he found Michael, his face pale with shock as he watched the bears enter with Logan close behind. "What the—" Michael began, but Logan quickly hushed him. "Poachers," he whispered. "They have Jacob. These bears just led me to you." Michael stared at the mother bear, who had taken up a position near the entrance to the thicket, almost like a sentry. The cub settled beside Logan, showing no fear of the humans. "This is impossible," Michael said softly. "Bears don't act like this. They don't help humans like this." "This one does," Logan replied. "She saved my daughter. She led me to you. And now we need to save Jacob." The radio on Michael's belt crackled to life, making them all jump. A voice came through, distorted but recognizable as one of their other companions. "Michael? Logan? Jacob? Anyone copy? Over." Michael grabbed the radio. "This is Michael. Logan's with me. Jacob's been captured by armed poachers near the waterfall. We need backup immediately. Over." "Copy that. We called in state police when we heard gunshots. Helicopter en route. ETA 30 minutes. Stay hidden. Over." "Understood. Out." Michael returned the radio to his belt and looked at Logan. 30 minutes? Can Jacob hold out that long?" Logan's face was grim. These aren't casual hunters. They're organized, armed, and now they're cornered.